Hi, my name is Dana Kletke, and I'm the co-executive director of Mentoring Artists for Women's Art in Winnipeg, Manitoba. I'm also a visual artist, and I work in drawing and mixed media. I am here located in Treaty 1 territory on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, and Dakota and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and the present, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. I am here today with Kelly Murray. I'm excited to talk to you about your work in the exhibition Fluidity. Can you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to be an artist?
Well, I have no formal training. It's just been a desire to create from the time I was young, and that has evolved and changed over the years from sewing to scrapbooking to sketching, oil painting, acrylic, and now I've just ventured into watercolor, which I've only been doing since March of 2020, which is the bulk of the work that is done in my Fluidity series.
I know watercolor isn't as forgiving as some other mediums. I'm not a painter, but how do you work with that medium, or how have you worked with it to make it work for you?
Well, with the other types of mediums, you can layer and change things. And I've found I can still do that with watercolor. And I can play with it a lot more than I thought I could, which is really encouraging for someone who's used to that kind of habit and history, right? So for me, it's layering colors. Sometimes it's wet on wet, sometimes it's wet on dry, and then it changes the depth of it. It's also a little bit different in how you're doing your different backgrounds and foregrounds and how you want them to pop. And if you're trying to lay a foundation color first and then add to it and then add texture to it on top of it, because watercolor is very flat as opposed to an acrylic or an oil where you can build up not depth so much, but texture. So there has definitely been some learning curves, and I am still learning.
And how are you learning? By doing, or are you taking some online classes, or how is it that you're figuring out the medium?
All of the above. Is probably the easiest way to say it. Our mentor for the RAMP program has been wonderful in guiding me and directing me in areas that I was struggling with, as she's a visual artist as well. So she's been able to help me with that. But I've also watched online videos, I've taken online classes, and I meet with a group from spring to fall. I was hoping that was going to start soon, but with the snow today, that's going to be a delay, where we do plein air painting, and then we learn from each other. So it works out really nicely that way.
Oh, that's beautiful. And getting you out into nature.
Yeah.
And your subject is nature.
And I have a history with alcohol ink, primarily with markers and stuff like that. And I've integrated that into my watercolor paintings as well to give it more depth, which I didn't feel I had the control with my brush at this point in time. But as I'm learning different brush techniques, that's being adapted in there as well. But I do like the mix of the two mediums.
That's in your work, there's a lot of, like, the colors are very pure. Like, there's a clarity of color and a purity of color. And I wonder, is that part of the alcohol inks, or is that the combination of colors?
I really like vibrancy in my colors. That's why I've struggled with making my backgrounds a little bit more muted and stuff like that. And I'm learning how to do that more. But I look at the area that I'm painting or drawing, and then try to expand it with what I see as opposed to giving it the depth. So I've had to adjust that a little bit as I've progressed. And it does definitely make a difference on how to do that. So yeah, I love the colors, love vibrancy of colors, as you can tell from the purple wall behind me.
Ah, that's great.
Makes me happy.
Yeah, I was gonna say the work, it really has a happiness to it, a joyfulness, but it also has quietness at times, or as you say, tranquility in your artist
Yeah,
statement.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about those themes in your work.
Well, my life is usually fairly hectic, more so when we're not dealing with the pandemic. Um, but the being near the water provides me a sense of peace. And from the sounds of it to the feel of it to the look of it, it just gives me serenity. And so that's where I went with all of the pieces, because as I'm working on them, they also give me that sense of peace. And being out in nature also, in the quietness of it, makes the difference as well.
The one thing I did notice was that water is evident in all of the works. Like that is definitely a thematic that runs through all of your work. And I'm wondering, what is your relationship to water? If you could talk a
Well,
little.
I work along the Winnipeg River. I'm a 5-minute walk from a beach from my job.
Lovely.
So for those that love to be near that, that's a jealousy point, I would imagine. But all along where we are, we have 7 power dams along the Winnipeg River. So you get a different sense of the power of the water, of the peacefulness of the water. And it doesn't matter whether it's fast moving or slow moving, I still find the water soothing. So for me, I just enjoy it, and it gives me that sense of tranquility.
There's something so powerful about water too.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
sound of it, but also the meaning of it. And
yeah.
that shines through in your work.
No, thank you.
Um, let me just look at my questions here. So in some of your paintings, you've introduced people into the landscape and people into the scene, and I'm wondering um, how you choose your subject, and then what is the relationship between the people in your work and the nature? Are they working together, or is there, because in some cases there's evidence of people such as the plane, and some people are in the paintings. Wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Um, well, because of where I live and work, I'm surrounded by it, and you can't keep people away from that space, right? And with the plane, that is actually a place of work for those individuals that fly people into the fishing cabins and stuff like that. And I've always wanted to attempt drawing that and the reflection of it on there, as opposed to just the reflection of trees and the sun or the moon on the water. I wanted to give it a different aspect to it. The one where I've got the lady walking along the beach, that to me is just a restful piece where they're taking time out for themselves and adding that to their day just to relax. And all of my pieces are about trying to get the viewer to relax in that moment. The one with the kayakers, you can see 3 people along the route, kayaking in the fall, enjoying the beauty of the area, but also at a slow pace. So they're taking it in and enjoying it. So it just spoke to me with the colors for one, and it spoke to me because of the peacefulness and people enjoying that moment.
When I look at your work altogether as a body of work, it almost feels like there's a narrative, like there's a story that's being told through all of the work with people and the landscape. And I'm wondering, do you intend it to be a bit of a story altogether, or do you work in a narrative, or are they very individual pieces?
They're pieces that speak to me. I've got a friend that's a photographer in Portage Prairie, and some of them are for pieces that she has taken pictures of that I got her permission for. Some of them are pieces that I've done, and some of them are pieces that I've just found online that were copyright free. But it's where it speaks to me, and I'm trying to challenge myself in the different places, from either a peaceful water to a forceful water, whether it be rapids or waterfalls or whatever the case may be. And then every sense of that water, from the beginning of the seasons to the end. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but I have a framed piece in each of the seasons behind me that will be showing in the physical show in Brandon. And I just chose it to go along that way because through every season there's a change, and we have to be able to adapt to change, but to be able to do it in a peaceful nature. So I guess there's a bit of a narrative without my even realizing I was doing it.
It made me think of if you actually work in illustration at all, because some of the works you have very clean lines, which is very impressive with paint. And then in some, they're a bit more muted lines. And
are the clean lines my alcohol ink? I would say so.
Okay. Sharing some tips.
Yeah. And again, it's control of brushwork and learning how to manipulate that with this medium, because it's a brand new medium to me, or fairly new. I mean, it's just a year, right? And learning how to work with the different textures of the paper and ways to do that, and not over saturate the paper with water so that it doesn't warp and change the look of how it is. I've also used fine liner markers to outline different pieces. Like if you look at the girl walking along the beach, I've used the fine liner with that. I've actually used the fine liner for some of the leaves in the spring sunrise picture that you can actually see behind me. I'm now wishing I had taken away my tripod from that space.
Okay, well, that explains a little bit. Like in some areas, you have a lot of detail, and then some is just really the essence of trying to capture maybe the moment in.
And yeah, the interesting part is the brush markers or the alcohol markers are brush markers, but it's just a very different way of working with it, and it's not as loose as a paintbrush would be.
Right. That's because I'm not a painter. I really have a hard time with control because I want to control it. And paint doesn't really want to be controlled.
Very much so. I've actually had that comment given to me that I like to have my work very controlled and not as loose. So I do that very much, and I've had to adjust and learn a little bit, but I still like bringing the control back in, because it's like, no, I want it to look just like this. So yeah.
Well, you found a nice balance.
Well, thank you. I'm trying.
Can you talk a little bit about your mentorship with Brenna George?
I can talk about that endlessly. Actually, I can talk about the group and Brenna endlessly. It's been a very positive and stretching experience. It's interesting. When I applied for the program, I was in an in-between place with my life. We had a house fire and we were living in an apartment. So that's when I decided to take on this new art form, because it was something I didn't need a ton of supplies for, as opposed to needing an easel and things like that. I could take it and go. So it's really nice for plein air work. And it was nice for the limited space and equipment that I had at that time. So with the pandemic, we have not been able to meet in person. We were supposed to have 2 8-hour days back to back together over 3 different sessions. And what we've had to do with that is we've had to do 2-hour sessions for several weeks to make up that time. So we're given an assignment and things to think on and plan for. And then we get together, it was usually on a Saturday evening, and then work towards that goal and that objective. We've learned from how to write an artist biography to artist statement. We've learned about how to put ourselves out there to galleries, to apply for grants and residencies, which aren't happening right now, but at least we know what we're looking for. How to track that and follow up once you have originally reached out and done that. How to put yourself out there electronically and find a method, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest or a website that reaches the kind of people that is interested in our type of art. So that then you can develop customers and develop that. We've learned how to price our stuff. We've learned how to work collaboratively together as a group to be able to put together our group statement and develop a logo for the whole situation. And each of the artists brought their own strengths to the exhibit, period. Is probably the easiest way to say it, because each person had something different to offer. And I think from our conversations that we've had, our group plans on staying connected even after the ramp program is over. And collectively, we have 3 other physical shows after the online exhibit. Just to give you an example of how the group has worked together to make that happen, we've learned how to take critiques and give critiques. Not something I was terribly comfortable with.
That's difficult.
But you find a way on asking people things, and then asking them questions about their objective for their work, just like you've just asked me, right? There's been so much, and I believe that we've honestly been able to learn and grow more with it being done through the Zoom lessons, because it's been spread out more, and it's given us time to adapt and rethink things and prepare and plan, instead of, oh, okay, we're going to cover this weekend, and you're not really sure what that's all entailing. And then setting goals, and she helped us, Brenna helped us with that as well, and then making our goals finite, instead of, oh, okay, well, I'd like to do this, and kind of the pie in the sky type attitude, and getting us to pick a theme, getting us to pick a series of pieces that will all work together, because they get much more notice that way. And it's things that we didn't know before, or at least I didn't, because I would just create as something moved me, as I saw it. And it's like, oh, well, I really like the way the light's hitting this, and I've gotten a lot more notice since. I've had people ask me to put my stuff into prints. I've had people ask to buy my stuff, and I've had people ask me to make things for them.
That's wonderful.
So it's definitely had a positive effect. Even though, like I said, it was very stretching, because there was things that's like, okay, and you don't know quite what you're getting into until you're into it. And then it's like, well, this isn't as bad as I kind of envisioned it to be by just the topic or whatever. So yeah, it helped a lot.
Well, that's really, really great that you're able to not only connect with the group in your area of Manitoba. I'm imagining everybody's quite spread out.
We're about an hour and a half at least away from each other. Yeah.
Right. And really and finding a way to connect, but also continuing that connection beyond the mentorship. And mentorship is so amazing in the fact that it's really pushing you to to discover yourself. And
Yes, very much so.
yeah.
Yeah, it took some, on Brenna's part, it took some drawing out of me to get my particular answers and my particular direction, but she managed it, and I'm very grateful to her.
Oh, that's great. We have time for a couple more questions. I'm wondering what's next for you. What are you working on now? Are you still working on a body of work for the show that's coming up, or you have many shows, it seems? Is it the same body of work touring, or are you creating new work?
Actually, I was just doing stuff before we started. I hadn't been able to do anything for the month of March, and I find I start to get a little twitch if I don't do anything after about 7 or 10 days. But my life took a different turn in March, so it was different. So I didn't get to do that then. The other part of that is I am continuing in my fluidity series at this point. Brenna suggested no less than 10 pieces, but up to about 20. The pieces I've submitted for Manitoba Arts Network, there's 12, but I've got another 2 that I'm working on behind me. So I don't know whether I'm going to go at the happy medium of 15. I do have a couple of ideas for the next series, and one would be Aurora Borealis, which will be extremely interesting with watercolor, but it will be building color on top of color, as I've learned to do with this series.
Great. That seems like you're really pushing yourself to try new things.
I am.
And how about size-wise? It looks like your work is
my paintings are 8 by 10 and framed 11 by 14. One of the plane was a 5 by 7 because I had prepared it in advance but not finished it. In other words, I'd sketched it and not colored anything. When I'm doing plein air, I like to work with the 5 by 7. I have not ventured into larger because again, it's a control thing for me. I like to be able to keep it in a certain space. I like to be able to have it done in a certain period of time. And my workspace wouldn't allow for much more than an 11 by 14 size anyway. And trying to find watercolor paper in certain sizes above what I have is interesting.
Right. Well, something to think about in the future, if that's something you're thinking about. But for sure, when you're outside in nature, compact or being able to travel with your supplies would be a factor.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's anything else you would like the viewers to know about your work that's in the show before we wrap up.
About my work that's in the show. I was going to encourage people to join the RAMP program when it comes to their area. As far as my work, the whole purpose of my work is to try and take you to a place of peacefulness so that you can strive to have that balance and calmness in your own lives. I find, especially if you're living in an urban setting, the pace is very quick and very demanding. And I believe each and every one of us need to take time for ourselves. My art is my way of taking time for me. But it's also a way of sharing it with others. So that would be my suggestion. Enjoy it. If you enjoy it enough and you want to contact me, feel free. I would love to talk with you. My other suggestion outside of my work would be when the Rural Arts Mentorship Program comes to your region of Manitoba, and if you aren't confident in your work but would like to expand it, or if you're wanting to find a way to connect your work with people that are interested in purchasing your type of work and learning how to develop your skill with that more, I would highly encourage you to try out for the program. I feel very fortunate to be part of it, and I look forward to the rest of it that's coming up.
Well, thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you for sharing your insight into your work and a little bit more of information about your process. And hopefully one day I will be able to see your work in person.
That would be nice.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to know the dates of what we have coming up, the Southwestern Manitoba Art Gallery in Brandon is hosting us in September. And then I believe we're at Pinawa Art Gallery in November and in Niverville Art Gallery in January of 2022.
Great. Fantastic. Well, best of luck. And thank you again for having this conversation with me.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I'll say goodbye.
Right. Take care.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.